over 20 years.
I can't remember exactly what they did, but they measured the amount of magnesium or whatever went into a particular alloy. And he worked there for all those years and retired from Reynolds Aluminum.
Your mother?
Mom worked as a seamstress. She worked sewing up mattresses and shoes, things
Shirts,
like that.
shirt
Shirts,
factory.
shirt factory, all of her life. Ran those big
So-
industrial sewing machines.
So you guys had lots of money and you spent a lot of money, right?
Well, they didn't have much money, but they spent as little as they could get by with.
And so if you came to their house, they wouldn't serve you supper, or
Oh no.
they wouldn't spend any money on you at all, would they?
Oh no, not much money, but there'd be plenty to eat.
And you'd be welcome to spend
Yeah,
as long as you
yeah.
want. They were very
Yeah.
friendly people, as I remember. See, I spent a week with them
Oh,
in
you
their
did.
Oh,
60s.
did you?
Yeah,
Oh, that's
I was on
after
a
we
seminar.
were married? Oh, that was
Yeah,
after we was
I was on
married.
a seminar,
Oh,
and I gave me a chance to visit, and
get to know him a little bit.
yeah, and I
Dad
enjoyed it
liked
very
the
much.
horse races.
Oh, he did?
Yeah,
Out at Turf Paradise in
yeah.
Phoenix.
He'd go out there. If you waited after a certain race, well, you could get in for nothing. So he'd go out.
That's when he would go. That does not surprise me one bit.
Yeah.
Okay, you finished high school?
Finished high school in '53 at Phoenix
Phoenix
Union High School. Went to Phoenix Community College now for a couple of years. Went over to Arizona State University and got a degree there, bachelor in biology. Worked for the University of Arizona in part-time out at the experiment station, working with lettuce. Met my wife, or wife-to-be, Karen. We went to Oklahoma, where I studied for a master's degree in plant pathology.
Mm-hmm.
Karen finished her BS degree there at Oklahoma State. Then we went from there. Since we couldn't get a job, we thought we'd get more education, so we went for a doctorate at Washington State University,
Pullman, Washington.
Pullman, Washington. Didn't quite finish that up. Went over to University of Idaho and taught 6 years. Then took a job down in Mississippi as working with forestry, and retired from that and came back to Arizona.
You didn't say we went back to Pullman and you finished your degree.
Oh yeah, I went back to Pullman and finished the degree after I'd taken that job with the Forest
In
Service.
1972, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
in '72.
Anyhow, so it
Where
was...
do we go from here?
Where do we go from there?
Well, let's go back as far as your memory will take you, because that's the hardest things to dig up.
That's the hard
Okay.
ones.
Well, like you mentioned, like in the cabin, that was the cabin that your mom and dad lived in,
Mm-hmm.
the log cabin. I didn't know they lived in a log cabin. Well, it'd been your grandma and grandpa, not your.
Yeah, that was Grandma and Grandpa lived in that old log house up there on the Taylor place.
How many acres did they have?
I don't know, Grandpa John, he worked around there for some of the other farmers. I think he might have rented or some sort of an agreement with local farmers, and he'd put out a few acres. He had a horse, a work team. I don't know what breed they were, but they were big work horses. I remember those. And he would raise a little corn. He always raised his own tobacco. And some of it would go to seed, and one time I remember as a kid I was coming home, so I gathered some of that seed up and took it from Mom and said the neighbor sent these pretty flowers down to you. She planted them out in the garden, and she didn't know what was coming up the next spring. And John, Grandpa was over there, and he said, "Well, Mildred, it's tobacco."
And that's when you grew your own tobacco for consumption.
Yeah, for consumption, right. And it's probably some things I shouldn't tell, but Grandpa had a bottle of you know what.
Mm-hmm.
Hid out in every brush pile, every field around the place.
Well, for emergency purposes.
Yeah. So you didn't have to go to the house to get a drink. And every once in a while somebody'd find one of them and do away with it. You know, it'd be a gallon jug with a quart in it or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember, so he would imbibe some alcohol occasionally, which got him in some trouble on other occasions. was having trouble killing a chicken one day, and I took it over to him. By the time he got through with it and the axe, there wasn't much of anything left.
Pieces. Well, was the chicken dead?
It was dead.
Well, you know, that's we need to say things like that because people today don't know anything about killing chickens.
Yeah.
Chickens is something you buy at the store and
Yeah.
cook.
And it was my job to, go out and kill the chicken on Saturday or every Sunday or
Right.
what it was.
Right.
And I don't know why I was having trouble, but I was having trouble, so I took it over to Grandpa and said, here. And he got the axe out, and that was the end of the chicken.
Mm-hmm.
And some other things that happened back in those years. We had moved to Arizona, and you could get Mexican liquor pretty cheap, but some of it, tequila or some of those liquors had a worm in the bottom of it.
Oh, yes.
Well, Dad bought Grandpa, a bottle of, I'm not sure what it was, Oso Negra or something, with a worm in the bottle.
That's the good stuff, the worm in the bottle.
And took it to Grandpa, and so he had that for years. He'd get a little bit every once in a while. It was real special.
Right. See? You saved that, savored it. It wasn't just moonshine.
Right. I remember that, and of course he'd take me down fishing or hunting. There was woods in that part of Indiana at that time. Since we've been back, they've cleared most of that. There's nothing.
Right, there's hardly any
All
woods left.
soybean fields.
But there was always some rabbits
Mm-hmm.
and squirrel. And we had a .22 rifle, which you probably helped shoot.
Yeah, well,
It was left up to Leslie's.
yes, that one. Okay, that was the prized possession.
Yeah.
I forget who wound up. I think Ronnie finally wound up.
No,
with
I.
Oh, you have it. Okay.
Yeah, I have.
I knew it stayed in the McCracken family.
Of course, it's wore out. We all would get out there would put matches in the fence post and see who could light the match.
It matches.
Yeah.
That's not a big target. You're trying to light the match.
Yeah, and you could do it. But as time went along with that rifle, I doubt if you could hit the broadside of a barn now. But anyway, we still have it in the family.
Good, good. Well, see, hunting was an important part of livelihood
You
then,
had to live.
because it was
Yeah.
that's how you put meat on the table, or extra meat. You might say free meat, because it was it was ranged in the woods.
I've been out with your granddad when we lived down there with him a short time at West Baden. We'd go out and get a possum, a young one, or a young groundhog.
Uh-huh.
And Aunt Ethel, your grandmother Ethel, she wouldn't eat it, and she wouldn't clean it. But she would cook it. She'd put some vegetables in it, and it was good. I didn't know the difference.
Possum or groundhog, either one.
Either one, they tasted great when she got through with it.
Well, they said it wasn't. Dad always said it just a little greasy. Other than that, it was just fine.
It was good. Of course, back then, I ate stuff that I wouldn't eat now. Fried fish eggs,
Okay.
okay, make a patty out of it. Fried brain.
Yeah, I remember eating fried brains. That was pretty good, really.
Yeah.
They tell you now it's dangerous.
If
but-
you get some.
But we ate things like that and didn't think anything about it. Today, I don't think I'd want either one.
No. And your mom always can every year food?
Oh yeah, and just like the rest of the women did, whether it was grandmothers or mother, quarts of canned meat, best sausage you ever ate in your life.
Mm-hmm.
All the vegetables, tomatoes, tomato juice, things like that. And I was telling somebody about digging in and said, how do I store, potatoes? Said we dug a place in the soil, packed it with straw, put a tarp in there, put the turnips or potatoes, what have you, in there, and cover it with straw, and then cover it with soil. And then in the midwinter, when you needed another few potatoes, go out there and open that up and get your vegetables out of it.
And it would be good.
Yeah, and there was, there in southern Indiana, there was what we called George Field, an air base over across in Illinois. And I remember riding in the school bus. Those kids were in the back of the school bus looking out, and a Lightning aircraft, the double boom, what they call the
Right.
fork-tailed devil, actually buzzed that school bus, came right over the top of it. Well, us kids just thought that was incredible.
Right. That would have been when, the 40s?
And right during the war, yeah, in probably 44.
Yeah.
And the other thing that happened those years, they had a peddler that had a school bus, and he had a whole grocery store inside of that school bus.
Mm-hmm.
And they came by once a week.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a chicken cage on the back.
On the back,
If
yes.
you didn't have money, you brought out a chicken, or if you needed a chicken, you bought a chicken.
Mm-hmm.
And they had candy and artificial chocolate and things like
A few
that.
canned goods.
And canned goods and some bread and things like that. I don't know what we did for ice. I know up at Leslie's, the spring house served as a storage place for milk.
Right, because there was no electricity.
No, there was no electricity at all. Not in those years.
No.
I can't remember where we got the water at Leslie's.
At the spring?
At the spring house.
Mm-hmm.
And down in southern Indiana, it was a pump, and it pumped about as much iron as it did water.
That was a hand pump, not electric.
Hand pump.
It pumped just about as much as your arm could put out, right?
Yeah, you had to pump pretty hard.
So wash day was a lot of handwork.
A lot of handwork.
Did your mom wash on did she have a wringer washer or an automatic?
She had a wringer washer with a Maytag engine on it.
Electric or gas?
Gas operated.
Gas
So you had to
operated.
crank that thing up and get it running, and hope you didn't get your hand caught in the roller.
Mm-hmm.
And we burnt coal for heat, and so there was one stove in the house. And I can't remember how it was up at Leslie's. Do you remember? Did you?
Well, we had a stove in the living room. Okay, that was a warm morning stove. It was a typical vertical pot-bellied stove. And then in the kitchen, there was a wood stove, and that's what Grandma cooked on, was a wood stove.
Right.
The bedrooms had no heat, because no insulation on the walls.
Same way down there.
Yeah, and so at night, after say by 2 o'clock, something like that, the temperature in the bedroom was the same as the temperature outside. So if it was 10 degrees outside, it was 10 degrees in the bedroom.
Yeah.
More than one time, because we had a crack in the window pane, and it'd be a storm with the blowing snow. There'd be snow on the floor when I got up in the morning. And it was cold. It was, of course, in the summer it was hot, because you cooked on a wood stove. It was hot in the kitchen. It was.
But your grandma could bake the best persimmon pudding.
Oh yes.
But where's the recipe? Marie didn't. Somehow it wasn't what Marie gave us.
Nancy pretty much got it.
I'll have to go up and get it, because I have a recipe that Marie gave me. She says, these are 5. There's something, one of these has to be it. And I've redone it myself.
What was? I knew what it tasted like. I know what the persimmon pudding you're talking about. And so she got to kind of the basics from Marie, and then she played with the actual ingredients and the mixture of the ingredients. And I finally said, that's it.
My girls can even do it now.
Yeah, and so yes, we have that recipe,
I'll have to get it.
and it's good. As a matter of fact, we buy persimmons every year.
Do you?
Yes.
To make it.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you buy them?
Well, they're plentiful around here, reasonably plentiful around here.
Yeah, well,
We actually go to Little Town in Morgantown, where I picked you up this morning.
You get the pulp, or
Yeah, you can buy it all.